Hi everyone, welcome back to Interpersonal Communication. And as promised, today we're going to be talking briefly about some of the concepts in Chapter 8, which deals with what is called the communication climate. If we think about the word climate, obviously we can have a warm climate, a cold climate, an environment that's bright and sunny, an environment that is gloomy or rainy. And so, in the same way, our relationships can really run the full spectrum as far as being satisfying or difficult. And we're going to talk a little bit about how to maintain what's called a confirming or a very positive climate for the relationships that you're in. That's really what Chapter 8 is about. You know, every person is different and every relationship that you're in is different. But there are some common features of satisfying personal relationships. And I know a lot of times when I say the word relationship, people are quick to think about a romantic relationship. And while that certainly would apply with the concepts we're talking about today from Chapter 8, we are also talking about every other kind of relationship you can be in as well. So this includes friendships, this includes relationships with coworkers, teammates, roommates, relationships with your family members, people that are your age, people that are significantly older than you, people that are significantly younger than you. You'll find a lot of these features of a satisfying relationship, or what your book calls a confirming communication climate, very successful. Growing up, I watched a lot of Friends, and my parents were always quick to insist that one of the many, many reasons why Friends was and still continues to be such a popular show around the world is because people are always searching for close friendships. And so it's easy to look at Joey and Phoebe and Rachel and Ross and Chandler and Monica and want to kind of have close relationships with a wide variety of people like they do. And so, as we talk about communication climate today, both in your personal life and certainly through movies and television, you've seen a lot of good examples of a healthy relationship, and you've seen a lot of bad examples too. We've seen, if you're a fan of The Office, you can see Michael Scott at his best and at his worst, and that includes um, both in friendships and romantic relationships, and certainly how he is, no pun intended, at The Office. Chapter 8 begins with a discussion of what Julia Wood defines as communication climate. And I know I talked about that just a little bit, but the relationships that we have tend to impact our entire lives. We tend to feel uneasy or negative when we're around people that are negative, who frown and who say negative things. We tend to be more positive, encouraging people if we're around people and engage with people that are supportive, that laugh and are overall positive in their interactions with us. And so Julia Wood defines this overall feeling or mood as communication climate. Her very lengthy definition is that communication climate is the overall feeling or emotional mood between people, warm or cold, safe or anxious, comfortable or awkward, accepting or rejecting, open or guarded, that is shaped by verbal and nonverbal interaction between people. Understanding communication climates will give you some insight into why you feel really relaxed, really comfortable with some people, and very anxious, very uneasy, very defensive when you're in conversation around some other people. Your book spends a lot of time talking about four primary features of satisfying relationships. And this is by no means an exhaustive list. If I were to force you to make your own list of what is a good relationship, and again, I don't mean just a romantic relationship, but a relationship of any kind, chances are at least a couple of these things would be on the list. All of our relationships are very complex and are shaped by a wide variety of influences and factors. And while we're going to focus on talking about investment, commitment, trust, and comfort, there's a lot more to it than that. And I just want to acknowledge that before we jump into these four. Investments are what we put into relationships that we couldn't retrieve if the relationship were to end. If we care about somebody else, whether that's a sibling, a spouse, a parent, a roommate, a best friend, we tend to invest a lot of energy, a lot of thought, a lot of feelings in our interaction. We may also invest financially with our time, with our money, giving gifts, and so forth. And investments tend to take a lot of time, but we will hopefully reap the benefits of the investments that we put into relationships. And that's important because we can't get back the time, the feelings, or the energy that we invest into relationships. When they tend to survey both dating partners and married partners, for example, Damaris did a study in 2007 that said the couples that tend to be happiest, whether they're just dating or married, tend to perceive themselves as equal investors in the relationships. If you're in a relationship, again, romantic or otherwise, where you feel like you're always initiating the conversation, you're always putting forth the effort, and the other person is not really giving back, um, that can be a very um, unsatisfying, almost resentful experience. At the same time, if we feel like the other person is investing a lot more time or energy than us, we might feel guilty, or we might have a tendency to kind of close off more. So your investment, you're going to make time and put energy into the things that matter most, and that includes investing in the people that you want relationships with. The second one of these goes hand in hand with that, and that is commitment, and that's the decision to remain in a relationship. Now, I want to point out that, just like your book says, commitment is defined by a decision, not a feeling. When you make a commitment, again, to a friend, to a romantic partner, you are kind of choosing to continue to invest and care for the bond that you have, the other person's well-being, looking for example, their best interest. And if there is no commitment, the relationship isn't going to last very long. Similarly, trust is very important, and it's a cornerstone of a satisfying relationship. I don't think I have to tell anybody that. I don't think anybody's frantically writing down saying, oh my goodness, you need trust to have a good relationship. Of course you do. And I think even compared to investment or commitment, trust tends to take a lot of time. If you think about the people that you trust most, your best friend growing up, maybe one of your parents, maybe a sibling, we tend to have spent a lot of time with the people that we trust most because they have, chances are, proven again and again that they are reliable, that they care about you, that they've made investments in your life and in the relationship that you've shared. And ultimately, they are the kind of person that will make you feel safe, that allows you to take risks. And we're not going to open ourselves up to people unless we feel like we can trust them. So you're not going to share your deepest, darkest fears or hopes or dreams or secrets with just anyone. You're going to share that with someone that you've spent a lot of time building trust with, and that's going to make a very satisfying relationship. Going along with that is this idea of self-disclosure. That when you start a relationship with somebody at work, in class, even beginning a dating relationship, you're probably not going to go very, very deep. In those early stages, you're going to proceed with some um, caution and disclose information that might seem superficial when compared to, let's say, your closest friends or your family members. But over time, we will disclose more and more information as we become closer and closer to someone in a relationship. And the fourth trait of satisfying relationships that your book mentions in chapter 8 in the communication climate chapter is comfort with relational dialects, which, unlike investment, commitment, and trust, doesn't exactly conjure up something automatically in a lot of people's minds. It's much more of a textbook kind of term. This is defined as the final quality of healthy relationships in which you are comfortable with the opposing forces and tensions that come up with normal relationships. Being comfortable and understanding that a lot of tensions that go on in relationships are normal. I think it's very much a myth that a healthy relationship will have no conflict, will have no problems, when that's certainly not the case. As we look at this next slide and talk a little bit about relational dialects, these opposing forces that are always continuous and, like I said, very normal in relationships. As humans, we have very complex opinions and very complex emotions. And so there are plenty of times where we want to be alone. We want to have privacy. We want me time. We want to fly solo. And there are plenty of times where we are desperate, seeking for connection, for time with people, and people that are going to share our interest and that we can talk to on a very personal level. And it's okay to feel different parts of those things at the same time. There are times where you really want to be close to somebody and times where you really need some space. Relationship counselors tend to agree that the most central friction in most close relationships arises from this kind of opposing need for our autonomy and for connection. That sometimes we want to spend almost 24/7 with our closest friends. We want to go on a road trip. We want to go on a vacation with them and eat our meals together, engage in um, all sorts of activities together. And then sometimes we want to hang out by ourselves and put our headphones on and just kind of zone out from our family and from our friends. And it's important that we're able to preserve both of those very natural needs in relationships. That can be confusing at times because your friends, your partners, your relationships that you're in, those feelings aren't always going to match up in the average day, in the average hour, or in the average moment. And it can be confusing sometimes, but it's important to know that both of those needs for autonomy and for connection are both normal and okay. That it's normal to think of both things at the same time. Some of the other kind of opposing forces that you'll see are a desire for novelty, that we want to go do something different. Um, this is something I think a lot about as a college professor. That if every class you go to at 12:15 and 1:40 and 2:55 look the same every day, class tends to be boring, and sometimes we want to do something different. And I try to at least occasionally make um, some course days, some class meetings significantly different than other days because we have a need for things to kind of be unpredictable. At the same time, if you go to class and you never have a clue what class is going to be like, that can become difficult. That can become more of a headache than it's worth. And relationships are the same way. We want some familiarity with our relationships. We like our friends to maybe greet us the same way, to have the same sense of humor in the average day, to talk about similar interests often. However, um, both in romantic relationships and with friendships and even with families, to be fair, we can fall into a rut and things can become so predictable that it can be difficult at times. So a good mix of both is typically going to be very healthy. And similar to our idea of autonomy and connection is this idea of openness and closeness. Sorry. Um, this is the third dialect between wanting open communication and wanting a certain degree of privacy, even with the people that we love most. You can love someone with your whole heart, and maybe you don't want to talk about every single thing every single day. At the same time, it's hard to be close to someone if there's not a level of openness. If both of you aren't open about sharing your life, your feelings, your struggles, um, just your everyday life, everyday experiences, that can be a difficult relationship to maintain unless there's a level of openness. And so a satisfying relationship is going to be comfortable with this range of opposing forces and opposing feelings that go on in a relationship. If you focus too much on one or the other, there can be a lot of misunderstanding along the way. Kind of going along with this as we fly through at least some sections of this chapter, we are skipping some things. Study after study of people from the world of communication, from the world of psychology, from the world of sociology, tend to say that we need confirmation in order to be healthy and in order to grow. That one of the most damaging relationships that we can be in is a relationship that is full of neglect and that's full of negativity. And so Julia Wood talks a lot about confirming and disconfirming clients. Again, to use my example from a few moments ago, we can have a very um, tropical location that's hot and sunny. We can have a very cold, snow-filled, cloudy climate. And in the same way, the relationships that you're in can be very positive, very mixed, or very negative, just like depending on where you are and what season it is, the actual environmental climate can be different. The people that you're with will have a different kind of confirming or disconfirming climate. Sorry. And so there are plenty of levels of confirmation and disconfirmation. And confirmation, just so we're clear, is feeling known and validated as an individual. This is kind of a cornerstone of a successful, healthy environment and successful, healthy interactions with others. It's also worth pointing out that few relationships that you have are exclusively confirming, exclusively positive and encouraging and healthy, and very few relationships are completely and entirely disconfirming. Hopefully, we tend to get out of relationships that are wildly disconfirming. Most relationships that you're in tend to be somewhere in the middle, somewhere in this mixed climate, or what we call a cycling climate. The key is not whether there is negative or disconfirming interaction, but the proportion of positive to negative interaction. Marriage counselor John Gottman says that the magic ratio in most couples tends to be a 5-to-1 ratio. Couples that remain satisfied and happy in their marriage tend to have 5 times as many pleasant, happy interactions. These are expressions of appreciation, humor, love. That can be something that's verbal or something nonverbal. Um, like a hug or something like that. 5 to 1, 5 times as many pleasant interactions as unpleasant interactions. So, disappointment, anger, frustration, verbal or nonverbal expressions of criticism, eye rolling, things like that. In other words, studies tend to show that a couple that maybe gets in an argument twice a day and maybe cuddles and hugs and expresses nice things 10 times a day would be much more happier than a couple that maybe has one fight a day and has no pleasant interactions. And so, again, there's a huge spectrum of this, but it's important to think about the relationships that you're in and that you want to focus on, and not just how do people treat you. Are people being confirming to you, giving you pleasant interaction with recognition and acknowledgement and endorsement, but also how are you treating other people? Are you providing a confirming climate at work? Are you providing a disconfirming climate in the classroom that you're in, with your suite mates, with your roommates? It's just important to think about. Um, your book goes on to talk about kind of 3 different levels of confirmation and disconfirmation. The first one of these simply being recognition. It's important that we simply recognize that the other person exists. We do this all the time by maybe touching somebody on the shoulder when we pass them, smiling at someone, saying, hey, good morning, how are you? Good to see you. And we can disconfirm others when we don't acknowledge their existence. I don't want to go super sad into this, but if someone you don't like or don't get along with maybe enters the classroom that you're in, you might not look up, you might not smile at them, you might not acknowledge their presence because you don't care about them. In the same way, obviously, if your parent is giving you the silent treatment, refusing to talk to you, refusing to hug you, obviously that can be very disconfirming and very damaging. So recognition, it really starts with that. The second level is acknowledgement. It's important to acknowledge what other people feel, what they think, what they say. Again, we can do this non-verbally by nodding, by making eye contact, with leaning forward when we're talking to someone. If your friend is really nervous and says, oh my goodness, I'm worried that I failed the midterm exam, it would be easy to provide acknowledgement by saying, so you're really worried that you didn't do well in the midterm, huh? That's a paraphrased way to, one, show that we were listening, and really acknowledge that we've heard the person. We disconfirm others when we don't acknowledge what they said, and we maybe respond with something irrelevant, something that's impersonal. So if your same friend said, oh man, I really worried that I did bad on the midterm, and they said, yeah, you want to go play Xbox or something later, they may have meant that as, hey, I'm sorry you did bad, or that you feel like you did bad, but let's go do something to take your mind off of it. But it seems like they didn't acknowledge what you said. It seemed like they changed the subject. And I think as we live in an age where everybody's got a cell phone on them all the time, it's very easy to be scrolling through Twitter or Instagram or whatever and change the topic um, based on something you've seen posted, when really we need to acknowledge people to provide a confirming climate to them. And ultimately, the strongest level of confirmation is endorsement. This involves accepting other people's feelings and thoughts. Um, and so this is difficult because sometimes we don't want to automatically um, accept what somebody else feels or thinks. Some people can make bad choices. They can make damaging choices. But disconfirmation is not just disagreement. Um, What's disconfirming is to be told, oh, it's stupid for you to think that you did bad on the midterm. Oh, you're acting so crazy to be worried about your relationship. Oh, it doesn't really matter how you did in that class. Those things basically tend to suppress what someone else thought was very important. And so endorsing somebody's feelings is one of the best ways that we can show someone that they're valuable, that they're important to us, and that they matter. If we look at just some examples of this here, if I say hello, that's very confirming, that's recognition. If someone doesn't say anything, doesn't even look my general direction, then that's not very confirming. That's a very disconfirming recognition. If I say, hey, I'm really sorry that you're hurt, that's very confirming. If I say, you know what, you'll get over it, that's very disconfirming. In the same way, if someone tells you maybe that they're having a hard time, and you say, you know, it's okay to feel what you're feeling. Hard days are hard, and a lot of times I feel the same way. That is a very great example of a confirming endorsement where we're accepting somebody's feelings and thoughts and responding to them, saying that their feelings are important and valid. If you say, you know what, you shouldn't feel sad and it doesn't make sense to me, that person is going to feel really hurt and they're most likely not going to open up to you again. In fact, they may have trouble opening up, maybe even to other people. So that's how that can be a very disconfirming message and ultimately create a very disconfirming climate. So hopefully, not just are you going to try to choose relationships as best you can that are at least more confirming than disconfirming, but be aware that every time you're talking to someone, you have the ability to give them a confirming or a disconfirming message. And again, this works even on a much more basic level. We're not just talking about relationships that are closest to you, but even smiling and saying hi to people that you've never met before can go a long way in making somebody's day better. I don't think that surprises you, but you're ultimately in charge of yourself and the messages that you communicate to other people. So I think it'd be wise for us to communicate as many confirming messages as we can, even if it's on that very basic recognition level to people we don't know well, and much deeper maybe on that acknowledgement or endorsement level to people we care about most. As we close and we talk about communication climate, it's all about trying to build satisfying relationships with the people that you spend time with. Here's some other kind of guidelines to think about. You want to use your communication to build confirming climates in an active way. It will not happen automatically. You will have to make that choice and be very active and involved in making the choices of how you not just choose your words, but how you choose to respond non-verbally. Um, it's also very healthy to accept and confirm others and to also affirm and assert yourself as well. Um, you can, for example, have a communication strategy that is, quite frankly, much too aggressive. So if we look at our little chart here on this PowerPoint and I say, tell me what you're feeling, I insist, that's like bossing people around. That's too far. You don't want to be that aggressive. You don't want to say, I don't care what you want, I'm not going to a movie. Your girlfriend, your husband, whatever, is not going to like that. At the same time, you don't want to be so much in deference, so much that it's kind of disparaging to yourself. So you don't want to say, well, if you don't want to talk about how you feel, that's okay, and you can do this if you want to. It's important to state your own feelings. So I think the middle chart, where you're affirming um, and asserting yourself in a clear but non-judgmental way about what you feel, what you want, what you need, without maybe stepping on anyone's toes or what they want. think that's an important thing to do. You should simply state your feelings in a clear, open, descriptive manner. So a much better middle ground would be, I would like to understand more about how you feel. Or, you know what, I'm not really up for going to the movies tonight. You can see how one is too aggressive, one is too self-defeating, or what we call deference in the textbook, and come to this middle ground where you're asserting yourself and your feelings. That will go a long way to really make sure that you're understood. And it's important to speak up in relationships to explain to people what you're thinking, what you're feeling. Otherwise, you won't grow, and you'll be kind of at other people's mercy. So please affirm yourself. And we come to the last slide for today. And I just want to mention that every relationship is different. The relationship you have maybe with your grandparents would be perhaps different than you have with a sibling, certainly different than you might have with a roommate, or you might have with your teammate or best friend. Every relationship we're in is different. Just as individuals are differ, just as individuals differ, so do the relationships that we're in. And so there's a tremendous variety in what people find comfortable, what people find satisfying. You might have a friend that enjoys a lot of talking, a lot of verbal disclosure, a lot of talking about their feelings. You might have friends that, prefer not to talk a lot, prefer to maybe go do something instead of being maybe less revealing in their communication. And these differences between people also can create a rich variety of friendships in your life. So every relationship is going to change over time. Every relationship that you're in is going to be different. But we should strive to respect a range of choices and patterns that we fall into in our relationships. Ultimately, remembering that the best way to understand what other people want, what other people are feeling, is simply to ask and to talk to them. And kind of going along with that, when you're talking to someone about what's important to you, about your feelings, about what you feel, what you want, what you need, a lot of times that can come with criticism, and it's as difficult as it can be. I would encourage you, as your book says, to respond constructively to criticism. Your textbook example is actually pretty good. It says, if someone were to call you selfish, it is easy to say, Psh, I'm not selfish, and to end that conversation and to end that line of thinking. However, what if you are selfish? Wouldn't you really want to know if you were selfish? You wouldn't want that to be a characteristic of your life. You wouldn't want that to define you. And so if someone were to offer some constructive criticism to you, even if they don't say it in a very constructive way, seek out more information. Say, can you tell me some ways that I've been selfish lately? I didn't even know that. Seek out more information. We all have blind spots, but the people that tend to be the most successful, not just in relationships, but in careers and in life, tend to be aware of not just their strengths, but their weaknesses. So if you're facing some criticism, seek out more information. Consider, is their criticism true? Maybe it is. And if their criticism is valid, whether that's selfishness from my textbook example or something else, if you reflect on it, if their criticism is accurate, we all have the opportunity to change, to be a better person, to be the person that we want to be, that your past, for better or for worse, does not define you, and the future is open to you. And so because of those things, even though it might hurt, your textbook concludes this chapter by encouraging you to thank someone who offers constructive criticism. Because if their criticism is valid, it's not just going to be something that is maybe difficult. It can ultimately be a gift to you that gives us the opportunity to see ourselves through somebody else's eyes, and like I mentioned a moment ago, to grow and change and ultimately um, become a person we want to be, to better ourselves with maybe different knowledge or skills or something like that. And if we thank the person who offered criticism, as much as that's easier said than done, we also open the door to communication with them in the future. Where if we're always quick to dismiss criticism, one, we're probably not going to grow very much, and two, we can close off a lot of relationships that might ultimately be good for you in the long run. So again, thank you so much for listening to my discussion of some parts of Chapter 8 of Communication Climate. My hope is that you can use your messages and your communication skills, both verbally and non-verbally, to build a very positive and healthy communication climate. Thanks for listening, and I'll talk to you again soon.